Hi everyone, it's Andrea Tooley. Thank you so much for watching this video. Today you're in for a very special treat because I have one of my great friends here, Dr. Alison Early. She is a comprehensive ophthalmologist and we are going to talk all about how we studied together for the ophthalmology written qualifying exam, WQE. This is the written board exam for ophthalmology. I know a lot of you have been asking for this video, and so we're going to chat all about the different study strategies that we used individually, and then also how we work together to be study buddies and study together for this test. So I hope you enjoy. Cue the video. Awesome. Hi, Allison. Thank you so much for being here today to talk all about written boards.
Yay! I'm so happy to be here. This is a fun thing for us to kind of rehash and remember everything we did, and hopefully that will help other people.
Such great times, great memories. Can you just give a little intro of who you are and what you do and all those kinds of things?
Absolutely. So I'm Alison Early. I am a comprehensive ophthalmologist. I specialize in cataract surgery mostly, and I see all kinds of other things in the office and more clinic-based stuff. I'm at Cincinnati Eye Institute in Cincinnati, Ohio, and I am in my second year of practice right now. I'm born and raised in Ohio, and I did my residency at The Ohio State University and finished there in 2018, and then joined Cincinnati Eye Institute after that.
And you're killing it there, doing a ton of surgery and
it's
seeing great stuff.
Really good experience. So have a lot of good things to look forward to when we get back in business here in a couple weeks. So.
Yes, exactly. So anyone looking for a comprehensive ophthalmologist in the Cincinnati area. Exactly. Okay, well, at least for me, when we're talking about the written board exam for ophthalmology, and we're both board certified ophthalmologists, so we took our written boards and we also took our oral boards, which happens after. And I've already made videos on our oral board preparation, and we actually studied a lot together for oral boards too. Yeah. But before that was the written boards. And at least for me, going into taking written boards, you know, I was doing my fellowship in oculoplastics. I wasn't thinking about comprehensive ophthalmology. I wasn't thinking about retina or glaucoma or all these other things. So I was really nervous starting to study, and having a study buddy like you helped me so much because I think you gave me a lot of accountability and also some structure.
Yeah.
So that was huge for me. So at least just like at the very beginning, I think, so we took boards in March.
Yeah.
And I think we started talking in maybe like December.
That's what I was trying to remember too. I think it was like middle of December we started thinking about it, and then we started like with an actual plan for studying in January, I think.
Yep, I think you're right, because I started worrying in December and thinking I needed to get my ducks in a row. I needed to start studying. And then, can you talk about how you kind of, just in those like very early phases, how you kind of started organizing your strategy, and then we can talk about how we kind of collaborated together.
Yeah, for sure. So my approach went back actually to my approach for studying for step one, which was another huge milestone exam. And for that one, I used a calendar, and I just printed out calendar pages, and I knew what study materials I was going to use, and I just made a calendar, and every single day had specific pages that I was going to study. And that worked extremely well for me because I just had that posted on the wall, and then I didn't have to spend any time on a given day deciding what to do. Yeah. So I sort of used that model for making a board study schedule, although not quite as detailed, I guess I would say. So basically I knew that I probably wasn't going to be able to reread all of the BCSC series because that would take forever. I've already read it all and annotated and highlighted and stuff, so I knew I would want to use that as sort of a supplement. But what I actually decided to use was this book, which is Friedman's Review of Ophthalmology. And this is separated into, I don't know, maybe 10 chapters or something like that. So it worked out well with the timeline that we had. And I basically planned to just cover one section each week in this book, and then along with the opto questions. So I pretty much just made myself a little calendar for what I was going to study each week. And then we sort of worked together on keeping each other accountable. And I think that was a huge part of, being successful with it, is knowing that you and I were going to be chatting on, I think we usually did Sunday nights.
Yeah.
So I knew that I had to get something done before that meeting or else I would be falling behind. So that's definitely helpful.
Yeah, I loved how organized you were about your calendar, because I think that's a big difference between us. Even with step one, I am not good at following rules. And so I'm just not. So even if I were to make a calendar where I said, I'm going to read these pages every day, I might stick to it for maybe 2 or 3 days, but there's no way I would stick to it long term, because I change my mind. And I just have to have a very fluid guideline. Like, I have to have guidelines and then be able to do whatever I want in those guidelines. So having you have some structure was really helpful for me. And then for me, instead of making a calendar, I had a big big sticky note that I put right up on my desk that was in my face every day, that had all of the subsections within the BCSC. So when we're talking about the BCSC, I'll show you, these are the books that we use in our residency. And there's one book for every section within ophthalmology. So this is the pathology and tumors book, but there's a retina book and a cornea book and a peds book, and there's 13 books, I think. And unlike Allison, I had not read all of these in residency. I mean, I had skimmed through them, but to be honest,
I read most of them and all of some of them.
Yeah, that's really good. No, you're really good. But I did not get a lot of them out of them in residency. I found them really overwhelming and too heavy and too dense, and I couldn't handle it. So I used the Friedman book was my Bible in residency. But then, so I made an outline with each of these books, and then I had to get through about a book a week, which was the same as your timeline schedule. But for me, I don't know why, it wasn't as rigid, and it worked better for me to have this checklist. And as soon as I got through a book, I would cross it off my list. And so I could see which topics and which books I had to go. And then I supplemented it with, obviously, opto questions, which are huge. And I wanted to get through all of those, was really important to me. Yeah. And I think I definitely did all the Friedman questions. So there's questions in these chapters too. And then there's questions in these books too. And I did all of those. One thing I will say that I did for the first time for written boards that I had never done for OCAPS, which is our in-training exam that we take every year during residency, which prepares you for boards. And really the only thing that OCAPS is good for is preparing you for your written board exam. I had never really gone through these for OCAPS, but I decided to go through them for written boards. But instead of reading them, this is what I did. I think I told you that I did this, and this worked really well for me. And this is a very random study strategy, but I'm going to share it here. So if you look in the table of contents, there are these big sections in the book, and then there's smaller topics in everything. And I remember an attending once telling me that any word in these books, any word that's bold, like either a topic heading or a bolded word, is a question.
Oh, wow. That's a good tip.
Yeah, which I don't think that's true, but I think it's fair to think that if it's a subheading or if it's a bolded word, you should at least know like a little bit about it.
Yeah.
So I actually went through this, and just with a blank piece of paper, I rewrote this outline just so that I could see it in my own handwriting. And then I would skim through the book, and I would look at every subsection. Like, so for example, in this chapter, this exfoliative glaucoma, it's a very small section. Yeah. And by the time we were taking written boards, we know most of these things. So I would just kind of skim through it, but I found myself being like, oh, wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
And maybe there was like 1 or 2 little sentences for each subheading, and then I would write it on my sheet. And I actually found myself flying through these books and getting through a lot more than I ever had in terms of content, which was really weird.
That's great, because I wondered how you were getting through. I knew you were using those primarily, and I didn't know how you were getting through them all.
I found it much easier to get through them as a fellow taking written boards than as a resident. As a resident, I felt like I had to read every word, and as a fellow, I could skim it because we already have such a strong background and we already know most of it.
So what I remember hearing in residency was that any word in those books was fair game for a test question.
That's actually probably true, but I scaled it back a little.
So maybe that was why it was like overwhelming for me to think about rereading them. But you're totally right that once you have the foundation of the framework of, you know, taking your in-training exam for 3 years, you know what things are testable. So it really goes faster when you're reviewing things because you can pick out what would be an important topic or an important question.
Yeah, exactly. I just had a thought of something I want to bring up, but in a second I'm going to write it down. Can you talk about how, like, what we did when we studied together? Because you said we would meet, we had a little Skype session or FaceTime session every Sunday, and we would assign a topic for the week, not a topic, but a book for the week. But can you talk about like what we did so that it was useful?
So I was trying to remember exactly because we also did a similar plan for our oral boards.
Yeah.
I think for our written boards, we would quiz each other a lot on optho questions, or if it wasn't just a quizzing back and forth, actually questioning each other, we would say, oh, I came across this question that I hadn't seen before, or, you know, this topic that now all of a sudden makes a lot more sense to me now that I'm rereading it, or I think we did a lot of like pathology images, which was something that was never my strongest in training on the OCAP exams. That was never one of my better sections. So I think we just tried to pick out high yield things that we had come across in the week leading up to it and share those with each other.
Exactly. I found that to be super helpful. I think that you would always have really good questions. You would be like, oh, I found this question on Opto Questions that was really hard or something, which was so helpful to me. And then the other thing that was helpful to me is that if there were topics that I felt really weak or struggling with, or I just didn't know anything about, just having somebody to discuss them with was really, I feel like I remember us talking about like the RPE, like in depth one day. And it was very helpful.
Yeah, and I think because we trained in totally different institutions, so our residency programs were structured really differently. We're obviously in different specialties now. So whereas like, I remember one topic, I think it was dacryocystitis, and I was like, I've never even seen somebody in real life. I guess this was probably for oral boards, but I've never even seen somebody in real life who has it. So for me, it's just like book knowledge, but then talking with you about it, you were able to say, every time I see somebody with this, these are the things that we do. So that like helping each other kind of apply clinical scenarios that maybe we don't see as often since we're in different specialties.
Yeah. I love that point. That's so true. Love it. Great. Yeah. I found it really helpful. And just like you said, just having the accountability, even if we hadn't really had useful conversations, just knowing that there was somebody every week that was going to judge me if I hadn't studied was enough to make me study.
Yeah. I think the other thing that we both sort of have in common is that we like to get up early in the morning and study. So that was something that we kind of leaned into as we were going along in the both written and oral boards, is that both of us were getting up at like 5 and studying really early in the morning. And so that doesn't sound great to a lot of people, but when you take into consideration that your entire day you're working and your brain is really tired by the time you get to the end of your day. And for me, like I have little kids, so I'd be working all day, come home, make dinner, bath, bedtime, and then by 7:30 or 8 o'clock, the last thing I wanted to do was open up a textbook. So I started just going to bed early and getting the studying done early in the day, which really helped just structure the day as well.
Yeah, the morning is the best time because it's quiet. Nobody's going to bother you. You have your coffee. It's very nice. And that's when our early morning study club hashtag began.
Yeah.
Yes. If anyone who's watching this hasn't seen our early morning study club hashtag, it is the best. And it caught on. It was just between the two of us.
Yeah.
It took off. It was great.
I know. It was like in this little niche that people knew they weren't alone anymore. Who were
it's so fun. Yeah, exactly. I loved it. That was so good. Yes. So find the best time to study is great advice that works with your lifestyle and that works with your brain, because other people are night owls and their brain turns on at night and they're ready to focus and get in the zone. And
yeah,
I am the opposite. Sorry, my computer did something weird. Okay. One other thing that I wanted to say, that towards the end of studying, once we were getting through the books and we were kind of coming closer to the test, this is something I tried to always do with step 1 and step 2 and OCAPs and whatever, is I always try to be really honest and hard on myself and really, really think about what are the topics that I really don't know. Like if I got a question on this, what do I not want to get questions on? Or what do I feel very uncomfortable talking about? And then I write out a list of those things. So I remember like towards the end, I felt like I didn't understand anything about like the COMS trial and melanomas. And there were all these topics about things that I was just thinking like, man, I don't know anything about nystagmus. And if they ask me something, I'm in big trouble. Yeah. And then once you generate that list, you have to be really hard on yourself. It's not pleasant because it's not stuff you want to learn about because it's things you're weak or don't feel comfortable with. But then you have to go through those topics and just master them or dominate them or whatever so that you can cross them off your list.
Yeah, I think that stuff fresh in your mind that you're not quite as comfortable with.
Yes, exactly. Yes, the things that you need to go over at the very end, like some of the genetic things that we all memorize at the very end, or optics or whatever. But I think people have a tendency to shy away from topics they feel really weak on. And my advice would just be to do the opposite and go really hard towards the end on all the things that you really are scared of.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. I think I did a couple things differently with studying for written boards than I had done when I was studying for like the USMLEs and OCAPs. Especially for the USMLEs, I always did my questions with random. So I didn't specifically select one topic. So every day, even if I was studying like the pulmonary block, I would do a random block of questions to keep it all fresh in my mind.
Yeah.
And when I was studying for written boards, since I was doing one topic each week and my goal was to get all the way through optho questions, and I was trying to do that twice. I didn't quite get through the second time, but I did probably like 75% of them a second time. Mm-hmm. And so in order to just reach that goal, the way that it shows you on the screen how many of each section you have, I just did each section a dedicated like week or whatever of all those questions. And then toward the end, like Andrea is saying, once I had gotten through all of them, then I started doing random blocks to jog my memory on all the things that it had been 6 or 8 weeks since I had studied. So I think both of those question strategies are important, and you can, maybe different people's minds work different ways, but when you take one of these tests, the topics are all randomized. So you need to be kind of used to flipping in between your brain, between retina, plastics, path, like all different topics. But in order to really hit it hard, it helped me to do a dedicated block and then do the random scatter later on when I was just kind of reviewing everything.
Yep, that's such great advice. I love that. I also did blocks so that I could focus and then go back on questions I got wrong and review when I was already in that like retina mindset or cornea mindset or whatever. But then doing them random at the end is such good advice. I was thinking too, neither of us did the AAO question bank for boards. So I wonder if people ask questions about that. I feel like the AAO question bank has really become popular now, but at least for me, when I was in residency, it was all optho questions, and the AAO question bank was not a utilized resource. And now a lot of residents are using it. I just don't know anything about it, and I didn't use it.
I don't know a lot about it either. I never used it. I think optho questions like you said, when we were in residency, was the source, and it seems to be a very live resource. Like they're constantly updating and editing and adding questions and stuff. So it didn't seem like a super repetitive thing to me. So it felt like still a good resource. I would assume that, like the questions in the back of the BCSC, which do pop up a lot on tests, are very similar. So that might be an asset to the AAO ones. But like you said, I don't have like experience with that myself. So
yeah, just thought people might ask us about that. And then the other thing is resources for optics. I used the Guyton Spiral Bound book. I love that book. It's always been good. And I also use Last Minute Optics, which people really love. But to me, I don't know, I like the Guyton book better. So that's what I use. I felt like I really over prepared for optics compared to what was on the actual boards.
Yeah.
But I like to over prepare for optics, because to me, if you know it, then it's a free point. Like as long as you know the formulas and the math. So I don't know if you have any other optics advice.
I always saved that for last every year. I hated studying for it, but then and there's like 300 optho questions or something on optics, but then you actually get into them, and most of them are not calculations, and most of them are not equations. So I think I always over prepared too, and it was never as bad as I thought it was going to be. I think as a very high yield thing to review, like the day before the test, is just look over the equations so they're kind of fresh in your brain. And sometimes I would even just write them down on the little scratch pad that you get in the exam
right
test
away.
center. Just as soon as you sit down, like write out those equations that you are probably going to need to know. And that way, when you get to those questions, you don't have to like remember in your brain which formula it was. So I kind of forgot about that little tip, but maybe
that's a great tip. I started doing that on the MCAT. I would practice what I would write out so that I knew in like 2 seconds I could just write it all out. And I've done that ever since. It's always a good tip, because what if like in the middle of the test you have a brain fade and you cannot think of the formula even though you knew it 20 minutes ago? It's just anxiety from the test. So that's a great tip.
I hope that's like allowed.
Oh, totally. No, it's totally allowed. Once you're in the test, you can write anything is fine. My other piece of advice, I've been thinking about all the things I wish people had told me or I knew, is I would recommend studying hard for written boards and over preparing and starting to study early, because it's a really expensive test. You don't want to have to fail and take it again. It interrupts your life, and you're already in your job or in your fellowship, and it's a year after you graduated residency. At least now, I think now they're changing it, so it's in the fall, which is better. But my advice is for people to study hard, because you would rather over prepare and then feel like it was easy and not stress. And even though I feel like we prepared so hard, I thought it was really hard, and
it was very hard.
It was so hard, and I was so scared, like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna fail, even though I felt like I had prepared really well. Studied for months, did all the questions, went through all the books, you checked all the boxes. So I would highly recommend. It's not something to blow off. Oral boards are not either, neither of them. So just study is my advice.
Definitely. Yeah. And I mean, by this point in your career, you know hopefully what like techniques and study tactics you do well with. So I would just really focus on how you learn best. And one of those things for me that I realized early on in med school was that having too many resources overwhelms me. So that was why I just kept it very simple on just a couple things that I was using to study, and just put on my horse blinders and only focus on what I wanted to study and what worked for me.
That's a great tip, because there's so many resources and you get overwhelmed. I felt really overwhelmed with step 1 because there were so many things, and I'd be like, wait, should I do this? Should I be doing this? Should I be doing this? And gives you anxiety. So pick a few things, focus on those, do those. And this is an easy test to do that with. There's not that many things that you need.
Right. Totally.
Great. Any other last piece of advice for written board takers?
Um, I was gonna say what you said about studying hard, because it is a tough time for no matter whether you're starting practice or whether you're a new fellow. Everyone's overwhelmed at that point in life.
Yes.
So you just have to dig down and find time and build in time to do your studying, because if you don't prepare, you're not gonna do well. It's a very hard test. I think
Yeah.
OCAPS is a good preparation, but I still think that the exam was very challenging.
I think so too. I thought it was really hard.
Yeah.
I'm with you. It's no joke.
Yeah, definitely. So, but yeah, I think studying with a partner is a really good accountability source, because your days are so busy, you have a lot going on. So having an accountability partner helps to just be that little prod that, keeps you on task.
Exactly. It keeps you on task. It helps you build structure. You help each other answer hard questions. You can remind each other about hard topics. Yeah, I'm really, really glad that we had each other. It made it much more enjoyable.
Yeah, and then you have a built-in study buddy for oral boards, which is even more fun.
So. Yeah, exactly. No, that's so true, because we kind of transitioned right into studying for oral boards, and we already had our system, and it worked really well for us. And so, yeah, that was great.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I'll put everything in the description box, but do you want to say where people can find you on social media, online?
Yeah, so mostly on Instagram at Dr. Alison Early. So it's Dr. Alison Early. So that's where I'm mostly present on social media. I do have a Twitter, which is Alison Early MD, but I'm more of an observer on there. So
perfect.
Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you so much. I hope everybody got some good tips out of this, and good luck studying for written boards. Thank you.
Bye.